Hey everybody, what's up? Just Ehren right here, Question Period Canada. I kind of screwed up. I didn't know that they were off all this week. I didn't know it was a break. We're gonna watch a Senate question period, and we'll jump right into it. Let's just get going.
Today we have with us for question period the Honourable Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, PCMP, Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence. On behalf of all senators, I welcome the Minister.
Let me remind you that during question period with the Minister, the initial question is limited to 60 seconds and the initial answer to 90 seconds, followed by one supplementary question of at most 45 seconds and an answer of 45 seconds. The reading clerk will stand 10 seconds before these times expire. Pursuant to the order adopted by the Senate, senators do not need to stand, and question period will last 64 minutes.
There we go.
Senator Platt.
We know the rules.
Welcome here, Minister. Minister, Canadians were dismayed last fall when a new directive was released substituting public prayers for the fallen at Remembrance Day ceremonies with, quote, spiritual reflections. A week or so before Remembrance Day, the new policy was walked back. The Chaplain General said, and I quote, "Any chaplain who participates in a Remembrance Day ceremony this year can propose a spiritual reflection or opt for the practice of recent years." The, quote, practice of recent years, Minister, meant prayers. The new directive was put under review, but we still don't know if it will apply to Remembrance Day ceremonies this year or the years ahead. Minister, what is the current status of this directive?
Thank you so much for that question, Senator Platt. First and foremost, let me be very clear that the directive was put forward by the Chaplain General of the Canadian Armed Forces and not the government. And the directive was put forward to ensure that the prayers in all services were going to be very inclusive. I, like I'm sure many other members in this House, have attended many Remembrance Day services on Remembrance Week, and I know for one that actually all of the events that I attended, prayers were still very much included within those services. However, we wanted, the Chaplain General also wanted to make sure that multi-faith types of groups, organizations, individuals could also see themselves within the ceremony. And once again, I think that overall the Remembrance Day services, as always, were very well done this year. And again, my experience has been that prayers were still very much involved in the services.
Well, of course, doesn't even start answering the question of what is the current status of the directive. I understand the Chaplain General promised a committee would be formed to review the new directive on public prayers at Remembrance Day ceremonies. So, Minister, has the review begun? Has a committee been formed? If so, did you appoint the committee members? If not, who did? Who are the committee members, and what is their mandate?
Once again, with respect to the prayers, very clear that in no way did the government of the day instruct the Chaplain General with respect to the directive that was brought forward. That was a directive that was provided by the Chaplain General himself. With respect to the work that was done, with respect to the committee, I can come back to you with respect to the committee members. I do not have their names in front of me, but I would be more than pleased to come back and to provide that to you.
Senator Martin.
Minister, my question for you today is concerning our Korean War veterans and their legacies of service and sacrifice during the Korean War, which is Canada's third bloodiest war. So as you are aware, next year will be the start of the 75th anniversary of the Korean War years, June 25th, 2025 to July 27th, 2028. Minister, what will Veterans Affairs Canada do to honor this milestone 75th anniversary for our deserving Korean War veterans?
Thank you very much, Senator, for that very important question, and thank you again for meeting with me this morning. I look forward to continuing a working relationship with respect to the area of commemoration and especially our Korean War veterans. With respect to the 75th anniversary, the Department of Veterans Affairs will again look forward in planning a commemorative event, more than likely both nationally and also internationally, as we did for the 70th event. What I can guarantee you is that our office will certainly be working in close cooperation with respect to the ambassador and also your office in order to make sure that we can meet the needs of our Korean veterans. Once again, last year we had some very successful events to commemorate the sacrifice of the men who served, and we look forward to being able to plan those events again. 5 years from now or 4 years from now sounds like a very long time away, but we certainly recognize when we're planning these types of events, we really have to start planning early. So again, I commit to you in making sure that that contact will be made.
Yes, thank you for that. And as you know, our veterans are in their late 80s, 90s, some in their hundreds, because they served in World War II as well. And I think the key to the legacy is to ensure that the war is no longer forgotten and that the next generation are learning about that in schools and in other places. So my question, my supplementary is, how will Veterans Affairs Canada ensure that the Korean War is no longer forgotten and long remembered through some of the educational initiatives that you have?
Thanks again for that very important question. I think commemoration in education is paramount, and it's up to all of us to make sure that those stories are not forgotten. Our commemoration events that take place, again, are not only for our veterans, but also for Canadians, and we have to make sure, once again, that our school-aged children, that all Canadians are fully aware of the sacrifices of men and women. For myself, as a fairly new Veterans Affairs Minister, I certainly have two priorities, and number one is making sure that the benefits and services that our veterans are entitled to, that they are going to receive them, that they're well taken care of. And commemoration for me is another very important area. We do a lot of work at Veterans Affairs Canada with respect to commemorating the First World War, the Second World War, and the Korean War, and that has to continue. Regardless if our veterans are getting older, we have to make sure that those stories continue on. We cannot forget. And furthermore as well, when it comes to our modern day...
Thank you, Madam Minister. Senator Cormier. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Welcome, Minister. In February 2023, the Commissioner of Official Languages, Raymond Théberge, asked Veterans Affairs Canada to take prompt action to ensure that French-speaking veterans receive the same disability benefits as English-speaking veterans. In a preliminary investigation, the Commissioner noted that for the 2022-23 fiscal year, the average processing time for French language files was 40.9 weeks, compared with 32.1 weeks for English language files. How has your department addressed this unacceptable disparity? And can you confirm whether the problem has been resolved? Answer. Thank you for your very important question. And I'd like to...
Just this afternoon, to explain to the group, there is no parliament this week. Like, they're not sitting at all. They're on vacation, or out of the house at least. I would like to say hello to Elizabeth, hello to Joan, hello to Brent, hello to everybody that's on here. Mubu, what's up? Hey, Tyrone. Yeah, it's going to be a weird week. We should be able to make some cool videos, though, with the extra time. So we'll see.
Even slightly faster than English language applications, but there's still work to be done. We need to keep an eye on the file. We want to ensure that we don't reverse the trend. Thank you, Madam Minister. In June 2022, the House of Commons Veterans Affairs Committee issued a report recommending that your department provide training about the LGBT purge to all its employees in order to raise awareness of the particularities of the resulting trauma for veterans who suffer the repercussions of this institutional discrimination. Madam Minister, where do you stand with the delivery of this training, and what concrete impact does it have on your staff and the victims of that purge? Answer. Thank you. Once again, a very important question. The department set up training to ensure that all employees receive training, especially with regard to GBA plus and gender issues. This is continuing. Last year, last year, the minister set up a forum for the LGBTQ community. We wanted to hear what their needs were, what were the issues, what could be done to properly support our veterans. And I'm glad to be able to say that I was also able to meet the Rainbow Vets group once again to ensure that we do the work necessary to take on these issues. So we'll continue to work with this community.
I think there's a 90%
Minister,
chance
my question
that
to
she's
you
wearing a
is in
wig.
your capacity as the Minister of Veteran Affairs.
Looks
In
like a
November,
wig.
I did a statement in this chamber on the repatriation of the unknown First World soldier from northern France. The soldier's remains will be interred into a specially designed tomb at the National War Memorial in St. John's to represent Newfoundland and Labradorians who served in all branches of the military. What is your department doing to support the Commonwealth War Graves Commission to facilitate these important remembrance actions?
Thank you so much once again for that important question. When I became the new Minister of Veterans Affairs, I had an opportunity to be briefed on a number of files, and I have to say this was one of those files that I became quickly aware of. We certainly recognize that the province of Newfoundland and Labrador certainly wants to see the repatriation of an unknown First World War soldier from northern France to be returned to Newfoundland and Labrador. The Department of Veterans Affairs, the Commemoration Department, is working closely with that department in order to make sure that that is going to become a reality. We also recognize that Newfoundland and Labrador became a part of our federation in 1949. So I can see that really, important meeting that they want to make sure that that repatriation occurs, and the department is working closely with, as I said, our colleagues from the province of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Senator Patton.
The former Minister of Veterans Affairs mandate letter states that a primary responsibility is to ensure that the government fulfills its obligation to support our veterans and their families. Part of this must include supporting the education and awareness of the actions of our veterans throughout history. What is your department doing to support such awareness campaigns?
Well, again, once again, the commemoration part of the work that we do at Veterans Affairs Canada is really important to highlight the work that has been done by our Canadian Armed Forces and our veterans, both nationally and internationally. But that commemoration work as well is also very useful in order to make sure that we educate our young people. Just this week, as an example, I attended many schools and we did Valentine's for Vets. Not only were we preparing Valentine's, but we were also doing a bit of education to our young kids. And they were just so proud in order to take part in these types of activities, and they were eager to learn about the sacrifices of our men and women in uniform.
Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Minister. My question is going to focus on research for veterans who are women. You notice I didn't say women veterans because we don't say men veterans. So veterans who are women. Dr. Maya Eichler from Mount St. Vincent University has recently completed a scoping report on the needs of women veterans. And in there, she came out with a clear call to develop a strategic life cycle of research from their service in the Canadian Armed Forces through to being veterans together. Are you aware of this report? And if so, what do you plan to do to address the findings?
I am aware of the report, and again, we certainly recognize that the experience of men and women within the military and also as they transition out is very different, and their needs are very different as well. And also, making sure that all policies, services, and programs have a gender-based analysis lens within our department, for me, is a top priority. Having been a former chairperson of the New Brunswick Advisory Council on the Status of Women, when it came to GBA+, it was something that I know very well. And as a department, it's not just lip service. We have to make sure that that work is done in order to make sure that our veterans, either men or women, receive the treatment that they need. And more research needs to be done within this area. We certainly recognize as well that the injuries that both men and women can sustain as a result of the work that they've done can be very different. And once again, the department has to make sure that those needs are met when it comes to those that we serve.
Senator
Hello,
Patterson.
Jonas.
Thank you. I will come back to GBA Plus in a future question. But so we know you've started the working group within the department on looking at women's health specifically. I'd like to know where we are with the progress of both the committee and in particular, I'm going to go back to, without data, we know nothing. So where are we with progress on developing a research program for women veterans?
Once again, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with respect to that area. I'm certainly not going to say that everything is perfect and all underway, but we certainly recognize that there's a real need to make sure that we have that clear data. If we want to affect change, we have to affect change with the data that supports it. And again, that is work that we continue to do with respect to the officials within the department. And I think the officials have certainly recognized that the minister is very eager, and we certainly want to see results in this area.
Senator Cordy.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Minister. I'm asking this question, Minister, on behalf of my colleague, Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard. Minister, 7 years after the Lionel Desmond tragedy, we now have the Desmond Inquiry to lead the way to healing for this community. My question today was not covered by the inquiry. The murder-suicide occurred in the Borden family home in Guysborough, the family home of Shana, Lionel Desmond's wife.
That's where I'm from. I'm from Guysborough. I know Lionel. I taught him swimming lessons before he did that crazy thing.
As human rights advocate Reuben Coward aptly stated, and I quote, "Nobody can heal in the environment where the harm took place." The Borden family are pleading for help, Minister, to move out of this house. Does Veterans Affairs plan on helping this veteran's family?
I can't believe this happened.
Thank you so much for that question. And again, the tragedy that happened on June 3rd, 2017, in Apratracity, Nova Scotia, is nothing short of an absolute tragedy. The community is devastated. The community, the province, and the country as a whole. As a result, the province of Nova Scotia launched an inquiry, and just last month we received the recommendations of that report. The judge in question prepared a 572-page report that I have reviewed and our department continues to review. The recommendations, there was 3 appointed recommendations, if you will, for Veterans Affairs Canada, and once again, our department will continue to review that and also work collaboratively with the province of Nova Scotia.
That was a tragedy down home, guys.
Thank you very much. And the follow-up is mine, Minister, just so in case Senator Bernard is listening. But, Minister, the inquiry didn't address the family home because it was outside its mandate. And I know you talked about everything that was reported, but that was not within its mandate. Shanna's parents still live in the house, but they very much want to leave the house because of the memories. It's challenging also to sell the house because of the stigma. Minister, compassion is needed for these survivors. Lionel Desmond's case fell through the cracks. Please, please help the family find some solace by giving them a new place to live. Can your department allow this request for the family so that it too doesn't slip through the cracks?
Again, I certainly want to recognize the devastation that the Desmond family, continues to endure. This is, again, as I've indicated, nothing short of a tragedy for everyone that's involved.
Family.
Through the course, as I've indicated with respect to the report, we are absolutely closely going over the recommendations that have been brought forward. And I also have asked my officials to follow up with the family with respect to the situation at hand.
I knew poor Lionel, like he went out of his mind.
Minister,
he was a good guy
has
before he
that
lost
all contracts with GC Strategies, the company at the heart of a Arrive scam, have been
people should have
suspended
known
since November. But
he was
yesterday, Senator Gold stated that it was CBSA that requested all contracts be halted.
We missed
Does that mean it sounds like it's in regards to CBSA only, or does CBSA have a say over contracts in other departments? He also stated that pending the outcome of a review, contracts with this company could be suspended. Is it could be, or is it already are? Senator Gold also stated that while contracts with CBSA had previously been suspended, it is only now that this applies government-wide. So which is it? Is it now, or was it in November? Perhaps you can clear up some of the confusion by telling us if Veterans Affairs or National Defense are still doing business with GC Strategies. If not, when were the contracts and work suspended? What date? How were you informed of the suspension of the contracts? And has the work they were doing been outsourced, or is it now being done in-house?
Well, once again, Senator, thank you very much for that question. I will certainly have to get back to you with respect to the details that you're looking for with respect to that. I certainly don't want to to lead the House astray.
It's a wig.
I would prefer to provide you with the proper information, and we can certainly do so in the very near future.
Senator Husakos.
Minister, regarding the gravity of the situation and what the government has said about contracts with GC strategies being stopped, it's amazing that you wouldn't know, Minister, about your two departments in question. Considering the Auditor General's scathing rebuke of the record keeping and basic managing practices in the department involved, I fail to see how these same people are best suited to be investigating themselves. Can you tell me who is conducting the review of contracts in your ministries? When did that review begin, and when is it expected to conclude? And will your government refer all contracts with GC strategies to the RCMP and Auditor General for a proper investigation by the AG and the RCMP?
Thank you so much, Mr. Senator. Again, as I've indicated, I will certainly get back to you with respect to the details that you are looking for. I certainly do not want to lead the House astray, and I want to ensure that we provide you with the proper details, and I will ensure that that is done in the very, very near future.
Senator MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Minister, just before Christmas, a committee in the Nova Scotia Legislature heard how the cost of living crisis has led to homelessness for some serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces posted in Halifax. The Executive Director of the Royal Canadian Legion told the committee that active military members are, and I quote, living rough in tents, living out of their vehicles, couch surfing, engaging in interpersonal relationships for the purposes of securing housing, which oftentimes puts them as victims to domestic violence. This is quite a serious epidemic, as he described it, and it needs to be tackled, end of quote. Now, Minister Blair seems to deny all of this. The Canadian Armed Forces Ombudsman says it's true. The Executive Director of the Royal Canadian Legion says it's true. I live in Dartmouth Cole Harbour. There's tent cities everywhere. What is the government of Canada going to do about safe and affordable housing for the men and women currently serving in the country?
Madame la Ministre.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Encore une fois, toute la question du logement.
Thank you again. Once again, housing is a complete priority for our government. We're continuing to make historic investments so that we can ensure there are housing for people in communities. As Veterans Affairs Minister, I can tell you that we made really great investments over the last years to ensure that housing will be available for our veterans. And indeed, in last year's budget, we invested more than $80 million, and I will be making announcements in the months to come about different community groups that have received grants for supplements to veterans and that will be able to provide additional services to them, for example, with regard to mental health or addictions. This is an urgent situation.
Can I get another question?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I'll make sure to tell those people in the tents that. My understanding is, in Veterans Affairs, they have a small group of people who are commissioned to identify unidentified Canadian War victims in Europe through DNA testing. Now I understand that the Veterans Affairs have decided they're going to discontinue this program and let it go. And I'm just wondering if you can tell us why.
We continue to do work with respect to that very important area. And again, the area of commemoration with respect to repatriation and the rest of it always continues. And as I've indicated to the comment earlier, we will continue to support the initiative, let it be in Newfoundland and Labrador, but in other areas as well. We continue to work in close collaborations with DND in order to make sure that that work continues. It's very important, and again, very happy to continue to proceed with respect to the work that's being done in that field.
Senatrice Meji.
Senator Meji, inaudible. Madam Minister, thank you for being here with us today. Staff of non-public funds are on strike, have been on strike for a month now, and they provide much-needed programs and services to veterans and their families. They are demanding fair wages, a uniform pay scale, and stable jobs. Could you give us an update on the current negotiations? Thank you. I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, I didn't have my earpiece on. Could you repeat the question, please? Yes. staff of non-public funds has been on strike for about a month now, and normally this staff provides programs and services to veterans and their families. Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'm very aware of what's happening with the strike. In the last few months, I was privileged to meet people on military bases across the country, and we were able to see the strikers. Negotiations are taking place, or must take place at the negotiating table. We want employees to have an acceptable contract. After all, their work is very important for veterans across the country. I hope this bargaining will continue at the bargaining table, will pick up again, so that we find the right commitments for both parties. Senator Meji, that's all.
Oil.
2 weeks ago, Judge Paul Scoville released his final report on the Desmond family, the Desmond fatality inquiry into those tragic deaths of Afghanistan war veteran Lionel Desmond, his wife Shanna, their 10-year-old daughter Aaliyah, and his mother Brenda in Upper Big Trackety, Nova Scotia, very close to where I live. The first of the 25 recommendations calls on the province of Nova Scotia to advocate with the federal government for caseworkers to be assigned to each veteran transitioning out of the Canadian Armed Forces. Minister, will you heed this recommendation and ensure that caseworkers are assigned to all veterans transitioning out of the forces, particularly those with trauma, so that people like Lionel Desmond don't fall between those cracks again?
Yeah. Absolutely. And once again,
he was a
the
good
incident
guy.
that happened in
Something terrible went down. He did
Nova
some
Scotia
bad things before
is a
it
tragedy.
ended,
and the family members, the community, continue to be deeply affected by this. I have reviewed the report that was prepared by the judge in question, the entire 572 pages of the report, and I've read it word for word very, very carefully. My department continues to look at the 3 recommendations, and one of which was asking that a case manager be assigned to the members that are transitioning out of the Canadian Armed Forces. Once again, we continue to work, we will be continuing to work and having contact with the province of Nova Scotia, and also doing a deeper dive with respect to the recommendations. This is work that I take extremely seriously, and we certainly want to make sure that our members that we are serving are receiving the help and assistance and the support that they need. So again, looking forward to continuing that work, and we will have more to say with respect to the recommendations in the next weeks to come.
Senator Coyle.
Thank you. The inquiry also states that Lionel Desmond was unable to join a transitional program into civilian life until he was formally released from the Canadian Armed Forces. This delayed access to resources that he needed in order to be healthy and successful in civilian life. Minister, why does Veterans Affairs Canada require an official release from the Canadian Armed Forces before starting that process of helping veterans transition back into civilian life? Why not be proactive? And could you tell us when in the next weeks we might, have answers to these questions?
Thank you. Again, a very important question. And I think that we have to recognize that the work that is being done right now when it comes to Canadian Armed Forces members that are exiting the forces, we certainly want to make sure that that transition, when they become veterans or in civilian life, is done as seamlessly as possible. And that is why that I'm working with Minister Blair in order to make sure that we can make that as seamless as possible. During the course of the inquiry, we've certainly followed the inquiry very closely as it was going on. Some changes have been made with respect to Veterans Affairs. Just to give you an example, when it comes to mental health services, when individuals are asking for mental health services, we want to make sure that they're going to have timely access to service and they won't have to go through the evaluation process, if you will. If someone is asking, they will receive the services. And over the past 2 years, 16,000 veterans have applied for those types of services, and we've been able to make sure that they had them, as I said, as quickly as possible.
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Madam Minister.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here, Madam Minister. My questions have, in a way, been answered, but I'm going to ask them again, I guess. The rate of suicide among former military is significantly higher in proportion to the general public. For veterans, women veterans, it is staggering 50% higher, and for men, it is upwards of 30% higher. It would be good to know that our Veteran Affairs is serious about addressing some of the underlying problems of despair among veterans, PTSD, lack of housing, and feelings of alienation from the society they were sworn to protect. Can you tell me if there are any new and significant programs in Veteran Affairs might be considering to address these problems?
Yeah, thank you so much once again for that very important question. And you are right, when it comes to access to mental health services, and when we look at the rates of suicide amongst veterans, they are higher than the national average. And as a result, we want to make sure that those proper services are put in place. That is why, as I indicated, that 2 years ago, we made the change with respect to Veterans Affairs Canada, that when veterans were applying for mental health services, instead of having to go through the evaluation process, the adjudication, if individuals are asking for those services, it's evident that there's a need immediately. So why are we making them wait? So from there, what we did, we made that change immediately. So if someone is asking for the mental health services, they will be approved and they will be able to access those services immediately. And again, as I've indicated, over the past 2 years, 16,000 veterans have applied and have received those services. They've been fast-tracked. And again, we have to be there for our veterans in their time of need and not make them wait when they need the psychological services that are required. With respect to housing, significant investments have been made. In Budget 2023, we announced an $80 million amount to address veterans' housing. And within the next few weeks, we are going to be awarding the contracts to the different groups that will be providing those services, rent supplements, and also wraparound services to make sure that we can set up our veterans for success.
Senator
Hey, Chance, hey, Cooney, hey, Thomas,
many
hey,
of our
Skilled
former
Gamer.
military
What's up, guys?
rely upon medication to see them through their
Canadian
day-to-day
politics.
struggles. Over time, their lives are put in danger by the very opioids they are prescribed. A multitude of former military have come forward to me and others as advocates of psilocybin and MDMA, saying that the benefits of these two psychedelics far outweigh any benefits from prescribed drugs. Some have gone as far to South America to acquire them, saying it is what has kept them alive in their time of need. Might we see some serious research into the advantages of these two drugs?
Yeah. Again, a very important question that you ask, and we certainly recognize that the Senate, I believe, and I believe you were one of the senators that spearheaded the research in that area, and a very important area, I believe. I think that we have to recognize, and I think we all recognize, that our collective understanding of traumatic stress injury has certainly evolved over the years. And as such, our treatment approaches as well has evolved. Having been a former social worker in my previous life, I worked with many individuals that suffered from post-traumatic stress injuries, and many of them, chose different therapy mechanisms, let it be psychosocial, let it be pharmaceuticals, etc. But we also recognize that psilocybin is an area as well of great interest at this point in time. There is some research that is being conducted. In actual fact, last week I was in Hamilton and I was at the Chronic Pain Clinic, the Center of Excellence, and I was speaking to Dr. Ramesh Zachariah, and we were talking about a number of issues, but I also talked about the research that's being done in the area of psilocybin.
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Madam Minister.
And Minister, welcome. And thank you for the segue into the 2023 budget directed to all federal departments to reduce spending by 3% over the next 5 years. In addition, Minister Anand announced last August that all departments must provide solutions by October for cuts to reduce government spending by $15 billion. This results in an apparent contradiction, as the same budget provided further funding to increase Veteran Affairs Canada staffing to address the long-standing backlog and wait time crisis. Yet at the same time, the department is being required to reduce overall spending by 3% over the next 3 years. Can you please clarify how these cuts are applied and what the effect will be on existing programs and new and backlogged applications?
Very good question, and thank you so much. Let me be very clear. There will be no programs and services that will be cut for veterans and their families. The cuts that we have brought forward are in the area of executive travel and contracts. Through Veterans Affairs Canada, over the past 8 years, we've invested more than $11 billion in additional services and benefits for veterans and their families. And in no way will those programs be cut at all through the departmental review. I also want to indicate that with respect to the work that continues, we will ensure, again, that the programs remain in place. And we also have to keep in mind that over the past number of years, as I've indicated, we've seen a significant increase in the investments that have been made with respect to services and benefits. In actual fact, the Department of Veterans Affairs has seen a 61% increase in the level of applications, and we've had to hire additional staff. Once again, the spending review will in no way affect that. In actual fact, last year we received additional funding in order to make sure that we could maintain those positions at Veterans Affairs Canada as we want to deal with the backlog that we had.
Senator Klein.
Thank you, Minister. We know that post-traumatic stress and other operational stress injuries are significant issues for Canadian veterans, and that mental wellness is necessary for living a fulfilling life with supportive relationships and rewarding employment. Furthermore, we know that veteran homelessness or suicide is usually preceded by deteriorating mental health and relationships, and often by addictions. Effective mental health treatments are severely lacking for veterans. What is the ministry doing to provide quality and timely mental health treatment to our veterans, and how long is the backlog? And can you, will your department please eliminate artificial cutoff dates that arbitrarily distinguish veterans on whether they were injured before or after 2006?
There's a lot to that question. I'll do my best to answer it as quickly as possible. With respect, again, to the access to mental health services, as I've indicated, we certainly recognize that when veterans are asking for mental health care, let it be addictions and mental health, we want to make sure that those services are put in place immediately. That is why that when it comes to the evaluation or the adjudication of those files, we just want to make sure they're approved immediately. And we've made that change 2 years ago. As I've indicated, over 16,000 veterans have benefited from that. We need to make sure that we treat the veterans where they're at and when they want the services, and that's exactly what we've done. It has made a significant difference as well with respect to the backlog. I'm pleased to say that as of December, we're at the 5,000 mark with respect to the backlog cases. We recognize as a department we will always have a backlog, just with some complex cases that we...
Thank you, Minister. Senator Plett.
Minister, I have submitted written questions to the Senate's order paper which remain unanswered for several years. For example, I have a question about a court argument made by the Trudeau government in 2017 that it did not owe a duty of care to Canadian Armed Forces members. That question has been on the order paper since March 30th, 2021, almost 3 years. I also have a question concerning the pay raise given to a former Chief of Defense Staff after misconduct allegations were made against him. That question has been on the order paper since April 20th, 2021. Our leader in the government here in the Senate, Senator Gold, keeps on telling us that he sends these questions somewhere into space and they never manage to find their way. The answers don't find their way back here. As Associate Minister of National Defense, could you tell me why I would not have received answers to written questions for 3 years?
Once again, Senator, I'm more than happy to take this back and to do some queries for you on your behalf. I've been the Veterans Affairs Minister now for the past 6 months, and the order papers that I've received have been addressed, and I'm more than happy to follow up on the matter and get back to you.
Hey, Janet, what's up? How are you?
Very much for that commitment, as well as the commitment you made earlier to me and to Senator Housakis. And we will certainly wait for your reply. I do have a number of other questions on the order paper that remain unanswered, so I'll put them on the record here as well today, Minister. The Royal Canadian Navy's readiness, the Kingfisher aircraft procurement, and the workforce targets across the Canadian forces. Minister, would you commit to providing the answers to all of the long-standing questions I have raised with you today, and would you ensure, Madam Minister, that the answers will be tabled here in this Senate chamber?
I'm absolutely committing to making sure that I follow up on your order paper questions.
Senator Carignan.
Oui, merci. Je fais un
I like
Yes,
Carignan.
thank you.
Like,
I'm reflecting on Senator Claymel's question.
he looks
The
like
question
Gollum,
of
though, a
the
little bit.
strike.
From Lord of the Rings.
What is the impact? You talked about it. What's the real impact on processing times of current requests? And what are the real steps you've set up to avoid additional delays? When it comes to processing applications, we've hired. Sorry, I'm talking about the strike, the effect of the strike. Once again, Senator, we recognize that when there is a strike, there will be delays. We don't replace those workers with other workers. It's important for them to come to the negotiating table.
La ministre, vous avez la parole.
The minister has the floor.
Présidente, encore une fois,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I said, it's important to resolve it at the negotiating table. Both parties need to go there to negotiate. It's extremely important for them to come back so that once again, that communication can continue. Again, we recognize that yes, when there are strikes, there are delays. But as a government, we want to make sure that negotiation continues so that workers have a contract that is fair. What are the real measures you're
Mr.
setting up
Peach, how
to
are
limit
you?
those delays?
qui travaillent à ces bureaux-là,
Again, people who work in those offices, some people stay behind, they are still working. We can't replace people who are doing this important work. So again, employees need to come to the negotiating table because that's where they'll get better results, and we want to make sure that they have a fair contract.
Senator Deakin, Ontario.
Hello, Minister, and thank you for being here. I think you have alluded to earlier in response to Senator Richards' awareness of the Veteran Affairs Committee's report. And what I'd like to do today, called The Time Is Now, Granting Equitable Access to Psychedelic-Assisted Therapies, which we've touched on. It had one recommendation and some very compelling testimony from veterans globally and experts certainly in the field. The one recommendation that Veterans Affairs Canada and the Department of National Defence, in collaboration with Health Canada and the Canadian Institute of Health Research, as well as applicable provincial and territorial authorities, immediately launch and fund a large-scale research program on psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy for treating those mental disorders and other conditions that have been identified as potentially being therapeutic targets for these types of interventions. So my wonder today is, we're still working through the adoption and requesting the government response, but your thoughts, your office thoughts and response on this one
Thank you, Senator. Madame la Ministre.
again, as indicated, I think that our collective understanding when it comes to treating post-traumatic stress injuries has certainly evolved over the past number of years, and we certainly recognize that treating different types of mental health conditions as well has evolved, and different treatment types are available. With respect to psilocybin matched with psychotherapy, we certainly recognize that there is a lot of interest. I know that through the Senate here, but also with some veterans that I have met with. I think with respect to the work that is being done, and I had indicated but did not have a chance to finish it, when I was in Hamilton last week, I met with Dr. Zacharias, who is the medical director at the pain clinic in Hamilton, the Center of Excellence. And I had asked him about the research that was being done in the area of psilocybin. And he had indicated to me that with respect to the work that he does and his colleagues at the World Health Organization, there is quite a bit of international research that is being done in the area. I think before that we can do anything, though, we really have to make sure that we have that scientific data in order to make sure that it is an appropriate treatment for the men and women that are seeking it. And again, more work needs to be done within this area. I certainly recognize as well that in Canada there is some research that is being done in this area. I believe there's a doctor in Toronto, Dr. Wagner, if my memory serves me well, is doing some clinical trials in this area. But again, I believe there's still a lot of more work that needs to be done in order to better explore kind of the benefits the possible benefits of this therapy.
Senator
He taught me
Deacon.
temper. Hey,
In
Mark, what's up?
2015,
How
the
are you
government
guys?
created Canada's critical injury benefit, a tax-free lump sum payment for our armed forces members who meet specific criteria, including severe and traumatic injuries, a sudden single incident, immediately causing a severe impairment. It's been reported that the access to this benefit has been really challenging, with wait times of well over a year for decisions. In one instant, the story of a veteran who denied this benefit because it couldn't be proven that a single incident led to his PTSD. So I do wonder, do you think this benefit is working as intended, and why there are such reported long wait times?
Yeah, thank you again so much for that question. And I think the issue of the critical injury benefit, we've certainly seen it in the media, different clippings that we've seen that I know that I've noticed over the past 6 months since I've been the Minister of Veterans Affairs. I think what we also have to keep in mind, however, is that Veterans Affairs has a number of different programs that our veterans are entitled to with respect to compensation programs, compensation awards, psychosocial programs, rehabilitation programs, and so on. With respect to the critical injury benefit, we certainly recognize that the numbers of people who qualify for that program are probably minimal. However, I do know that in the winter of last year of 2023, the department has updated the language with respect to the qualifications of that benefit, because we certainly want to make sure that people understand what are the eligibility criteria in detail. So
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Minister.
Lofreda.
Senator Lafreda.
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Minister, for being with us.
I'm familiar with Veterans Affairs Commemorative Partnership Program, and I have no doubt that you share my view that it's important for us as a society to honor our veterans, to commemorate our rich military and peacekeeping legacies, and to engage with Canadian youth in the hopes of instilling in them a sense of pride and respect for our forces. We know there is currently a recruitment challenge among the Canadian Armed Forces. Are there specific educational programs in place at Veterans Affairs that would help fuel this sense of pride and perhaps make the Armed Forces an attractive career choice for our Canadian youth?
Well, thank you so much. And yes, like you, I feel that the commemoration program through Veterans Affairs Canada is a very important program and initiatives that we undertake both nationally and internationally. With respect to your specific question, however, with respect to helping in recruitment, I believe you're absolutely right. Being the Veterans Affairs Minister, I certainly see the work that we do with respect to commemorating our elderly veterans, if I will, with respect to the First World War, Second World War, and Korean War. But I think we have to do a better job at commemorating our modern-day veterans as well. And I think by doing a better job at commemorating our modern-day veterans, it will encourage younger people to also want to join the forces. So as a result, we've certainly, undertaken some initiatives in order to make sure that more work is done in that area. And I certainly hope that we are going to see, increased excitement with respect to our younger generations to want to enter the forces. At this point in time, on average, we see about 8,200 members of the Canadian Armed Forces that are retiring every year. So we really have to do a job at making sure that we do our part in recruiting those members. And I also think that by commemoration, it certainly is a way forward, and looking forward to continuing that work.
Senator Lofreda.
Merci. Thank you for that answer.
Hey,
and as you mentioned, there are
what's
many
up?
initiatives that exist whose mission is to educate future generations of Canadian youth about the history of wars and conflicts and Canada's contributions in maintaining and protecting peace and security. One such initiative that comes to mind is the International Forum for Peace, Security and Prosperity, a great Canadian initiative. Can you speak to us more specifically about your department's work in engaging with youth, and if you are familiar with this forum?
I'm familiar with the forum, but certainly cannot give you a dissertation on it, but I've certainly have met with some individuals that have taken part. With respect to the engagement of our youth, it's absolutely a priority. Just this morning, actually, I met some individuals that are involved with the the RCAF, the association, and they were talking to me about the different types of programs that do exist out there. And they were talking to me even about the cadets program. I think that we really have to, put our sleeves up, roll up our sleeves, and really make sure that our young people are more involved and more informed with respect to the different opportunities and programs that do exist out there. Again, if we want to recruit and retain members of the Canadian Armed Forces, we have to make it appealing to them, and we have to go reach them where they're at. So all of these types of programs and initiatives are absolutely beneficial for our younger population.
Senator Patterson.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to our GBA Plus conversation. A lot of what we hear from veterans is their inability to access benefits that they feel they need to access. And again, I'll focus on veterans who are women, veterans who come from equity-seeking groups, and certainly from our 2S LGBTQ2+ community, because their unique needs are distinct. We know that we need data, but in order to do that, we have to ask the right research questions to begin with. Can you please tell me what Veterans Affairs is doing in order to create a specific GBA plus sex and gender-based analysis tool that works for veterans, so we are able to capture those things such as occupational exposures, reproductive issues, et cetera?
Thank you so much. And once again, this is certainly an area of great interest to myself and also to the department. We want to make sure that veterans, again, get the help and the support that they need when they're accessing benefits. Earlier on today, a senator had asked about the delays that were happening with respect to treatments, applications for benefits, I should say. And not only were the francophones affected by the delays in the treatment, but also women veterans. I'm going to use that term, apologies. But we saw that there was a real delay in those applications as well. And why is that? Well, I think that one of the reasons we've seen, history has shown us that we've had certainly a lot more men that were in the Canadian Armed Forces that became veterans. So assessing those files and evaluating those files, it just kind of came natural. They just kind of knew if you jump out of a plane, your knees are probably going to be impacted. But when it came to women veterans, I think we all can agree, you know, that our anatomy is very different. And the injuries that we sustain in our bodies are very, very different. So as a result, Veterans Affairs Canada actually put in place a dedicated team of individuals that actually adjudicate the files for women veterans, because again, we have to make sure that that gender-based analysis is done, but also that we think about, you know, those, you know, different types of medical conditions. That is just one example of the work that is being done at the department. Again, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but we are well on our way in making sure that we can properly provide services to our female veterans.
Senator Patterson.
What's up, devil man?
So we
How are
also
you?
know that the way this system is set up to look for benefits, which are insured benefits that veterans get, it's very kind of siloed. You have a physical condition, you have a mental health condition, but we also know in modern science it's very rare that you don't have a mental health component that is being somaticized through physical ailments, certainly when there are all the conditions of service around there. What are you doing in order to have a look at people coming to you with their first claim being for a physical injury, but they have a mental health challenge as well and need to connect with mental health? How are we breaking down those silos so we automatically offer access to mental health along with their physical support?
I think, and again, thank you so much for that really, really important question. And work continues to evolve within this area. As you've indicated, I think it's very difficult to look at one health issue or mental health issue in silos. One oftentimes affects the other. And we want to make sure that our veterans are going to have access to the care that they need. And it oftentimes has to be a multi-pronged approach when it comes to that care. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's really important to make sure that when the adjudications are done with respect to these different types of claims, that we really have a holistic approach when looking at these matters. Once again, when it comes to our female veterans, we have that dedicated team. We've seen a lot of progress in that area, but again, we have to continue to do that work in order to make sure that we provide the proper services to those that have served our country.
Senator Kuzner.
Thank you very much. Good to see my friend and former colleague. I, too, would like to weigh in on the Desmond inquiry and the recent study that was tabled.
What?
In December 2015, Corporal Lionel Desmond, he had his firearms license revoked because he had been arrested because of a domestic dispute with his wife. 5 months later, May 2016, it was reinstated, even though he was in the care, a federally funded care program. Through the inquiry, the staff had said at that particular time, Desmond had been mentally unstable. I guess my question is about communication chain, the chain of communication and the gaps, and as Senator Patterson referred to silos, it's the transition of the information from Veterans Affairs caseworkers to mental health workers to frontline.
Thank you, Senator.
Did you see that in your, did you see that?
He's not getting cut off.
Madam Minister.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
And thank you so much, Senator Kusner, for
There's
that
so
question.
much of my
Once again, I'm
local
going to
riding.
reiterate the
Like,
tragedy that happened
Kusner used
in
to be the MP from my area.
Nova Scotia is nothing short of a tragedy. And our heart really goes out to all the families and community members that have been impacted by this tragedy. As indicated, the judge that was in charge of the inquiry, published a large report, and there was three recommendations that were specific, if you will, to Veterans Affairs Canada. The first being that a case manager be assigned to veterans transitioning out of the Canadian Armed Forces. Number two, to ensure that individuals diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder or other health issues be provided a copy of their health records to be ingested into the Nova Scotia records. And finally, to improve the transfer of health records into each other's record database. So we certainly recognize that sharing of information, sharing of health records has certainly been flagged with respect to the inquest in the inquiry. And again, my department is doing a deep dive with respect to these recommendations and looking forward in the next weeks to come in order to provide more details with respect to that. I also want to add that shortly after the document was launched, or the inquiry report was launched, I also reached out to the province of Nova Scotia because, again, I think there is recommendations on both ends, on behalf of Veterans Affairs, but also on behalf of the province of Nova Scotia. We want to ensure that we do all that we can to prevent any such tragedy from happening again.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Senator Kusner.
Thank you very much, and I apologize. I was being scolded by the Speaker. Madam Minister, you know, recommendation 12, it states that they want to ensure frontline professionals in multiple systems, such as the health and mental health, education professionals, social services, people in the justice system are up to date, especially on current information with intimate partner violence, and that will, you know, developing risk assessments and risk plans going forward. I guess the study would have brought all this to light, but there must have been discussions within the department about these gaps in this information. You know, were there steps being taken prior to that? Sorry again, Madam Speaker.
Madame la Ministre.
Madam Minister.
Thank you so much, Senator Kusner. I see that you, I'll just, with respect to, yeah. With respect to your question, first and foremost, I think I first of all want to be very clear that during the inquiry, we certainly followed the inquiry very, very closely. We did not wait for the results of the inquiry to come forward with the reports. As such, some changes have been made at Veterans Affairs Canada. One example, you know, with respect to mental health services. But again, we certainly have to make sure that we do a deep dive with respect to these recommendations. Again, indicating we want to do all that we can in order to prevent this type of tragedy from happening. But sharing of information is certainly one of those areas that I think has been a key component with respect to the recommendations, and I think it's something that we're going to have to look at very closely.
Senator Martin.
Yes, Minister, this question is on behalf of my colleague, Senator Elizabeth Marshall from Newfoundland and Labrador. After the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in 1991, the Canadian Armed Forces joined the largest coalition of power since World War II, entering an active combat zone alongside coalition partners. CAF members played an important role in this conflict, especially in air and naval operations, demonstrating the dedication and distinction of these Canadian troops. Despite these facts, Veterans Affairs Canada has denied these veterans the respect and compensation they deserve. Although serving in an active combat zone, your department designates them as special duty veterans rather than wartime veterans, entitling them to fewer benefits and a lower commemorative standing than other veterans. So, Minister, why won't the government change Persian Gulf veterans' service status from special duty to wartime service?
Hi, Nancy.
Thanks again
What's
so
up?
much for that
How are
question.
you?
And I want to be very clear, being designated as a special duty service does not minimize in no shape or form the contributions, the bravery of those who served in those missions. We have, however, heard from many individuals since I've been the minister asking us to take a look at that particular area. And I believe the ACVA committee, the Parliamentary Committee on Veterans Affairs, it has tabled a motion to look at that in order to do a study in the area, because again, I've been advised that there's been quite a bit of interest in that area, and I think that that situation merits a study.
Minimizing their service and duty in any way, but it's as you say, it deserves the study. And also our coalition partners have recognized that Persian Gulf war veterans engaged in wartime service, the Canadian government has refused to follow suit. So I guess why are we not doing what other countries have already done for those who served in the Gulf War?
Yeah. Once again, that is why that we've asked and tasked the Veterans Affairs Committee at Parliament in order to do a deeper dive within this area. I think also it's really important to keep in mind that it's not just for that conflict. I think we should really be looking at all conflicts so that we don't find ourselves in this repetitive cycle, you know, for the future conflicts that we will face. So I'm looking forward to seeing the work that ACVA committee will be doing, and looking forward to the recommendations that I'm sure that they'll be bringing forward.
Senatrice Miville-Deschênes.
Senator Miville-Deschênes. Welcome, Madam Minister. Last August, a note from your department obtained by La Presse Daily revealed that the cost of reimbursing cannabis costs had exploded for veterans. 6,000 veterans are refunded the cost of 6 grams of cannabis a day, whereas the daily average, according to Health Canada, for people who use it medically would be 2 grams a day. Now, I understand that the veterans are suffering. Many of them have seen active conflict and they are suffering from it. But could you please resolve this mystery? Madam Minister, thank you very much for this question. The health and well-being of veterans is at the very heart of the services and programs that we offer to veterans across Canada. In order to help veterans who have received a medical recommendation for cannabis from their doctors, we do indeed have a reimbursement program. Of course, we don't provide a prescription or recommend it, but as a policy at our department, it is true that we reimburse rather the costs for the veterans in question. Senator Miville-Deschênes, I understand your policy in general. My question is more specific. How is it that what should we understand, in fact, from the fact that 40% of veterans who are using cannabis are using 7 grams a day rather than the 2 grams recommended by Health Canada? Answer. Once again, I'll be more specific. March 31st, 2023, we had 5,000 veterans, approximately, who had been approved for the upper limit of cannabis, for medical cannabis every day. And that was $165.7 million in costs. The costs of this program are discussed with our experts in health, and no amendment has been proposed to the program for the time being.
Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to add a statement on the Persian Gulf conflict. There was around 400 people who were ground troops as part of one Canadian field hospital in the Royal Canadian Regiment, of which I was a member. So I promise you I'll put that over here. Secondly, I want to follow up on the point about determining what is conflict and what is war. It brings up 2 points. One of them is we lost 158 people in Afghanistan, and I do believe that was a conflict. We lost quite a number in the Balkans, in Somalia and Rwanda. I think the most important part about having a look at this next study is that we start to review, we have to look through conflict with a different lens and the impact it leaves on those who survive those events. That's my statement. So my question to you is, what is a veteran? A veteran in many people's eyes is someone from World War I or World War II and what that represents. One of the biggest barriers to accessing veterans benefits in modern military people retiring is they do not identify through that or get through the door. What can VAC do to try and make it more encouraging?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. First and foremost, many Canadians, when you ask them what is their perception of a veteran, oftentimes people will tell me they think of someone at Remembrance Day events with a walker in a wheelchair at the nation's capital. But I think we all recognize that when it comes to the definition of a veteran, there's a lot more. Sure, we have our senior veterans, but we also have our modern day veterans. And we have to recognize that in Canada, we have more than 450,000 veterans within this country.
So many.
How do I identify veterans? Well, oftentimes the simple definition, if someone has completed basic training and is honorably discharged, they qualify as a veteran. I'll share with you this anecdote. At Christmas time, I was with my family at Christmas, and we have a new benefit for veterans that they will have a free pass at the national parks this year. And my nephew had served as a veteran, is now a veteran, served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 5 years. And I had just made the comment to him, look, you're going to qualify for the National Parks Pass. And my nephew looked at me and said, well, Jeanette, I'm not a veteran. And he had served 5 years in the Canadian Armed Forces.
Hey, Steve, what's
so
up?
again, we do have to do a better job at identifying these veterans and also making sure that they self-evaluate and see themselves as veterans, and again, to make sure that they know what services that they are entitled to. We still have some work to do in that area, but again, that is something that I'm absolutely seized with.
Senator Patterson.
That's it for me, ma'am.
Senator Atulajan.
Speaker, Minister, in 2014, former Prime Minister Harper promised to have a monument erected to pay tribute to the commitment and sacrifice of Canadians in helping rebuild Afghanistan. Following a juried competition, Team Davu's design was selected. The jury's decision was later overruled by the federal government. This decision was justified by responses from veterans and the general public to an anonymous online survey. However, the jury had consulted these survey results and remained firm that the Team Davu's submission was the best option. This sets a dangerous precedent and surveys from being the most reliable instruments. For example, 35% of the respondents were from Ontario and only 2% were from Saskatchewan. Minister, how does this government justify breaking its own government procurement rules?
Did you think
Again,
a man
thank you so
was
much for that
speaking?
question.
I
With
thought a
respect
man
to
was
ensuring
speaking.
that we erect a monument in commemoration of our Afghanistan veterans is an absolute priority, and work is underway. As you've indicated, the Department of Veterans Affairs had conducted a questionnaire or a survey, and that questionnaire and survey was sent out through the MyVac account to make sure that veterans and their family members would be aware of this questionnaire or survey. To our great surprise, more than 12,000 Canadians responded to this survey, and most of them were veterans themselves or family members. Through the survey or the questionnaire, it was very clear that the large majority of veterans themselves had selected the Stimson Monument because they felt that it represented more the sacrifice, the loss of the veterans in question. The Department of Veterans Affairs at the time made the decision to listen to veterans and moved forward with the Stimson Monument. And I guess at the end of the day, we are erecting this monument, and we want it to be meaningful to those who have served. And that is why that we made the decision to choose and to respect the wishes of the veterans.
Senator Atulajan.
Thank you. Minister, Canada's combat role in Afghanistan ended in 2011, and the last of our service members left in 2014. Why is it taking so long for a monument to be erected to honor our veterans from Afghanistan? We are in 2024 now.
Yeah. It's a very good question and a very valid question. I think that we have to keep in mind that back in 2014, 2014, there was a site that had been chosen for the Afghan monument, and the veterans, the veterans of the day were very, very dissatisfied with the location that had been chosen for the site for the monument. The veterans at the time had indicated the site that was chosen would flood in the springtime, and in the wintertime would probably not be accessible. So when we formed government, the first thing that we did was to choose another site, and then from there, the process started with respect to the consultation process in making sure that we move forward with respect to choosing the concept. And we are hoping that within the very near future that we are going to start seeing the construction of that monument, because as you've indicated, it's been a long time, and we certainly want to make sure that we do all that we can to commemorate and to thank the men and women that have served and lost their lives within that mission.
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Honourable Senators, the time for question period has expired.
To join me in thanking Minister Fitzpatrick.
Out of time, it looks like the show is over. That's how it goes. So I was unaware that they're on a break this week from Parliament. So there's no Senate, there's no question periods. There's a big opportunity to make some other stories, though. We do have stories to tell. We're learning more about this Canadian politics stuff. We just started like 6 months ago, hanging out with you guys, watching some of this stuff. We've got a pretty cool group of people now that like watching the show together. Like, I love it. I love saying hello to everybody, like trying to catch everybody just to say hello and see who is like showing up, who's in attendance for today's politics. You can watch a soap opera, I suppose, but what does that have to do with the days of our lives? Like, what's going on in our federal government these days is changing our lives day to day. How expensive has it gotten for you? Like, when I'm at the grocery store, I still buy apples and bananas. I used to buy everything, but now I buy apples and bananas, and I buy the cheap apples. But there's nobody in the produce section, guys. Nobody. Like, or the meat section. I don't even know what Canadians are eating. Like, how much is this going to cost us, this change into the WTF agenda, like as they transition us from being how we are to being happy eating bugs and owning nothing? Like, I don't know. We'll see. I've got to say, I'm so excited about this chat like that we have going on for these question periods like through the week. It makes my day. Like, when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see everybody. That's a nice feeling. Like, the politics, they kind of suck because a lot of those politicians are liars and clowns. We know that. But there's some that we really like, and when we get to see them, makes us all feel a little, gives us a little boost. I don't even know what to say. I just know that times are so tough in Canada. Like, I'm a single guy that does own a house, but I've seen like how tight it's become. And I can only imagine for other people that, again, not to sound like I'm spoiled, but I'm okay. But for really poor people, like, what to do? How do you even go to the grocery store? How do you heat your house? I don't know. Times are tough in Canada. Anyhow, it's just a blast having this chat and getting to hang out with all you guys. Like, I feel like I've got about 150 people on here now that I kind of know by name or like their handle or whatever. And that is nice. Like, because we are, I think in this channel, I don't know how, but like, it's not like right-wing nuts that are drawn to this. It's people that want change for our country, for our citizens, for ourselves. Like, we'll see where it goes. We do need an election. I think the NDP is going to break down, because if they don't, how are they ever going to survive in the future? Because people will never trust them again if they don't pull the rug out from beneath this Liberal NDP coalition government. They can do that. We can have an election in May. That would be great. We'll see. Just before April Fool's Day, because that's when the new carbon tax or carbon rebate is coming out. They're calling it a carbon rebate. Imagine, they think we're so stupid, they can change the name from a tax to a rebate and think like, oh, it's a rebate. My name's Ehren. We have a blast here. I love you guys. It's so much fun. We make lots of other videos. We're here daily. We do shorts for fun, all of that stuff. Check out our channel. Be in touch. We have a community that's growing. And people that are in this community, especially the ones that watch the live stuff, are really cool people. Like, I'm pumped up. When I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see the audience today. It's really fun like that. We're going to get going. Have something healthy to eat today. Stay warm. Times are tough in Canada. Pay attention. Share this with somebody. Get notified, all that. We're out. Gonna run. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's a lot of fun.